In many workplaces, there is a climate of fear around this issue, exacerbated by the failure of many trade unions, like Sandie's, to advocate for female members who seek to protect their hard-won rights to single-sex spaces.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So there's been a development in the Sandy Peggy case in the whole story in regards to the male who identifies as trans, who was allowed to change in the women's changing room. There's been a development. Sandy is appealing certain aspects of the judgment.
Whilst I am delighted that the tribunal was critical of Fife Health Board and found they had harassed me, their judgment, I believe, falls short in many respects, and that is why I certainly won't be giving up this legal fight.
Turning now to the Tribunal's substantive findings. Some of the findings are hugely problematic. For instance, the judgment places responsibility on female employees to raise complaints if they feel uncomfortable about sharing single-sex spaces with men. This ignores industrial realities.
In the UK, we now know that the Equality Act is referencing biological sex, not identity. That has been re-established, so to speak. It never went away, but it was being interpreted all wrong. And the UK Supreme Court said no, where the Equality Act affords rights to people based on sex, it is referring to biological sex. So because of Sandie Peggie not giving up, not letting this go, taking this case on, NHS Fife has restored women's changing rooms for females only. But it turns out now, this person, the trans-identified male, is a doctor. And, when you're a doctor, you can work anywhere in the world. This male doctor has now moved to Australia. He has registered as a female doctor, or at least he's been allowed to mark himself down as a woman. You can imagine all the implications that has. If a woman wants a female doctor and is looking up female doctors, they may very well get Dr. Beth Upton, who is a male, one who claims to identify as a woman. That is a real possibility, and that is very, very disturbing indeed. And it says a lot about Australia and what Australia allows. And that is very disturbing, considering we are waiting still the results or the judgment related to Giggle versus Tickle, where the courts have to once and for all decide what it means to be a woman. Can a man be a woman? Australia is still deciding on whether women are allowed to have their own single-sex spaces. Spaces that are based on biological sex, not gender identity. That decision is still pending. But in the meantime, a male doctor is allowed to mark himself down as female and possibly mislead future patients. So official documents have been uncovered in New South Wales, which shows the transgender doctor listed under the name Elizabeth Ruth and Nikki Upton. And under sex, it states female. This comes after the Scottish Sun on Sunday revealed Upton had fled 10,000 miles to start a new life down under after leaving the NHS at the end of last year. The move followed a bitter legal battle sparked when Miss Peggy was suspended from the A&E unit at Kirkcaldy's Victoria Hospital in January 2024. The nurse had complained about sharing female-only facilities with the medic, who she claimed undressed in front of her.
I am not a campaigner and had never heard of the phrase gender critical when I first raised complaints over 2 years ago about my employer's decision to allow men into female-only changing rooms. I just knew instinctively that it wasn't right that women were expected to undress in front of men in private spaces, and I still believe this to be the case.
The long-running tribunal later ruled NHS Fife bosses had harassed Miss Peggy on 4 occasions, and the Health Board has since confirmed its legal bill has exceeded £400,000. Records from the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, AHPRA, confirm Upton is now working as a trainee in emergency medicine. The Upton is based at Port Macquarie Base Hospital and Kempsey District Hospital in the southeastern state. AHPRA protocols define female as any individual whose biological sex is that of a female and anyone whose gender identity or gender expression is that of a female. And we have had various reactions to this news. Mary Hoden, director at campaign group Women's Rights Network, said, "It's shocking that Upton has now been allowed to register as a female doctor in Australia. It may well be legal there, but it airbrushes any inconvenient past from public view. If a female patient asks specifically for a female doctor, it is usually for a good reason. Either she is a victim of SA or DV, or maybe she simply feels more comfortable being examined by a female." And of course, in an emergency situation, I doubt people are going to specify whether they want a male or female. But at the same time, you're not really going to get a chance to research if this person is really a female or not. So you may request a female doctor, and then a man shows up, and it's an emergency situation. So it's like you're cornered. What are you going to do about it? That would be terrifying, quite frankly. Either way, it is not compassionate medicine to send a male doctor who was living as a female. Absolutely. And then Helen Joyce of Sex Matters slammed the move amid fears it could put both patient rights and staff safety at risk. Male doctors should never practice as female, and medical organisations should never, under any circumstances, record doctors as the sex they are not. Doing so sets the scene for patients' rights to be breached. And are we going to have the same situation again, where this male doctor wants to change in the women's changing rooms? We're going to have the same situation over in Australia, which is why this Giggle versus Tickle case is extremely important. And it needs to be decided as a matter of urgency. But it's been, 8 months? They still haven't made a decision? This is what Sal Grover had to say about that. She said, "I was in a pit of depression on Monday and Tuesday. I have been waiting over 8 months for the Giggle versus Tickle decision. I feel like I'm being severely punished. I'm so ready to move on. I just want to run a woman-only platform. I want to do exactly what I set out to do. I'm so over talking about this issue. I never want to even think about men who claim to be women ever again. But I won't stop fighting until it's over." I said, "I'm looking forward to Giggle starting up again. You are going to get a ton of support." And she said, "The new version is amazing. Not quite ready, but almost." So that's exciting news. So we're still waiting for this decision. And meanwhile, men are going over to Australia from countries where they don't recognize them as women. Apparently, it was recently decided that men cannot be lesbians in Australia. That does indicate that Australia is slowly moving in the direction that a man cannot be a woman. And this is what Sal had to say about this story. "It's relevant to know that at the present time in Australia, men who claim to be women can use female changing rooms. So everything that we've seen unfold in Sandie Peggie's case can very well end up happening in Australia with this very same doctor. That is very concerning indeed. We have female nurses, female healthcare workers who are going to be subjected to men claiming to be women going into their changing rooms, including this same doctor who caused all that upheaval over in the UK. Beyond everything else, it should be disqualifying for a doctor to not accept the reality of biological sex. I 100% agree, because we have OBGYNs refusing to accept that men cannot get pregnant or refusing to say it aloud. Why, I do not know.
And you're here as an expert, called by the other side as an expert, and you've been telling us that you follow, right, you're a doctor, and you follow the science and the evidence. So I just want to know, based on the science, can men get pregnant? That's a yes or no question. It really is, I think.
I think you're trying to reduce the complexity of a lot.
I'm not. I'm trying to get, it's not complex.
Even stating biological fact is something that some of these doctors refuse to do. So how can you be a doctor? This is where the rubber really hits the road. The female patients want of a female doctor over a man's supposed right to call himself female. Who wins? The woman or the man? Truth or lies? Reality or ideology. A lot of Australian women in regional New South Wales are about to find out that men can currently be women in Australian law. But never forget, sex doesn't change, but laws do. Very well said there. So we shall see how this turns out. Are we going to have more court cases, more legal battles to establish that a man cannot be a woman? And what's more concerning is, where does this leave female patients? Where does this leave female nurses, female healthcare workers? What protections are there for these women when we have a man who was allowed to register as a doctor? Are women going to be misled into thinking they're going to get a female doctor, but instead get a man pretending to be a woman? And on top of that, are told that they're not allowed to see him as anything other than what he identifies as, even though he's clearly a man. Reality says it. Biology says it. Their eyes are showing them that. They're going to have to ignore all of that because the law in Australia allows it. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's the woman who gets punished. We're not going along with it. We're not going along with the pretense. The woman gets punished financially. The woman gets punished professionally. And this is a classic example of why it's so important that the law recognizes biological sex well above gender identity. It's so important that legislation is defined accurately. Yes, we know gender identity was added because of Julia Gillard, her administration. They added gender identity.
It seems that actual women like you, me and Moira, have less rights than trans women. And Peter, it's really important to keep reminding everyone out there watching at home how this happened. This happened because of Julia Gillard's government when they amended the Sex Discrimination Act in 2013 and deleted the meaning of the word woman. They repealed the meaning of the word woman. They took it out of the act. So that's who we have to blame. You know, Julia Gillard, who everyone holds up as the feminist icon, she is responsible, and her government is responsible for leaving women in the situation that we currently are.
But the original Sex Discrimination Act more than likely wasn't considering men when it was affording rights to women. Men have their own rights. So let's restore that so we don't have any more court cases where female nurses have been violated, have been made to change in front of men, or having men undressing in front of them.
It emerged during the hearing that Fife Health Board then embarked on an archaeological dig to find material to discredit her. It was even suggested to Sandy by Fife Health Board's KC during her cross-examination that she'd lied about having experienced a menstrual flood on Christmas Eve 2023.
Women should be allowed to have their own spaces, men should be allowed to have their own spaces. And there shouldn't be any crossover, because you cannot change your sex. I shouldn't have to say that. But apparently in Australia, it's still necessary to say that. So let's hope Dr. Beth Upton, all these men who claim to be women, get a dose of reality when hopefully the laws in Australia begin to change. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video. And a huge thank you to all of those who have hyped my videos. It is much appreciated.